We want to give you a live look now at the White House in Washington this morning. President Trump storming into the White House with a whirlwind of a first week, quickly making good on a number of campaign promises. Trump's first full week of his second term saw him sign dozens of executive orders, speaking daily with members of the press and using some of the same language about his critics that sparked fears that he would use the presidency for retribution.
We're joined now by Davidson College professor Dr. Susan Roberts to discuss this first week. Good morning, Dr. Roberts. We're now a week into our new administration. So how do we compare these last 7 days historically with other presidencies when we talk about executive orders and just getting right down to business?
Well, I think the clearest and most straightforward thing that your viewers can do usually refer to analyzing the presidency and accomplishments the first 100 days. And on the White House, whitehouse.gov, there is the best, they've captured the best, and it's called the first 100 hours. And I think that it's a laundry list of all the things that the president has done, and they're really not in legalese. You can see for yourself what the president has done and intends to do.
Well, and let's talk about one of the ones that we heard on the campaign trail from Trump, Dr. Roberts, from Trump. We knew he was going to fulfill this within the first couple of days in the Oval Office, talking about immigration, right? And we can go all over the place with this. We've seen what happened in the last 48 hours with these back and forth conversations with Colombia, what it looks like there with some of the tariffs imposed. But when you even bring it down to North Carolina, we even have CMS families and students and parents nervous about what the trickle-down effect of some of these immigration issues could look like here.
Well, I think part of his strategy is to fire first, i.e. Fire people, but also ask questions later. And I think there's been a lot of emphasis on what he's going to do without a lot of emphasis on the impact. And there are persons all across the country, and you couple that with birthright citizenship, it makes for a climate of fear and anxiety.
Dr. Roberts, we heard from President Trump during his inauguration saying that we need to put to an end to the weaponization of the DOJ. But in terms of going against and going after people who have opposed him, even Senator Lindsey Graham was critical of the fact that he pulled Secret Service protection from his former National Security Advisor, John Bolton. He also ended security detail for Dr. Anthony Fauci. So he says on one hand he's not going to go after people, but clearly he's going after people who have wronged him.
He is going after people who have wronged him, and the firing of 12 inspectors general is a clear indication that he's going to go far and wide. And I think people are looking at the protective service. I think Dr. Fauci has said, I'm going to get a private security detail because the threats are real. And Trump it's not just bluster, I don't think. I think he means to carry out some sort of, whether you want to call it retribution or payback, he's going to do that. And I think he promised to do that, whether or not you want to say it was a promise or a threat. And I think he'll make good on much of that. Whether it'll go so far as members of Congress, I do not know.
And Dr. Roberts, we talked about this. This has been only 7 days so far, and a whole lot has happened. Again, we have to go online to see it all. What do we make of what comes for the next 7 days and beyond?
Well, I think you'll still see a continuation of, and the new term is in that 100 days, it's going to be illegal aliens and not immigrants or undocumented workers. I think that'll be next. I think there'll be some finessing with the tariffs with Colombia, and I think you'll see some issues concerning pardons. There was a troubling story that I did not read, headline that Trump has pardoned a man in Mint Hill with some accusations of sexual abuse or something like that. I don't know. I think there'll be a lot of rumors, but I think you'll see some things that are performative. TikTok, for instance, some things that are substantive, but you look at the size, you look at the scope, and you look at the tempo. The tempo is not going to change.
Well, we will continue to follow that same speed that the president is issuing some of these orders as well. Dr. Susan Roberts, thank you so much for your time as always. We really appreciate it.